Okay, well, welcome back to the EduHERO Podcast. This is our partner podcast, and we bring adults into the room for this podcast. And today we are so honored to have an Indian Hill alum, class of 91, Scott Holzapfel, here with us. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great to have you. And we also have Jeff Damadeo, our K-12 Director of Leadership and Career Development at Indian Hill. Welcome, Jeff.
Great to be here.
So, gentlemen, you both are in the thick of it. We're halfway through a school year. You're busy people. Scott, you've been up to some new things, and when we talk a lot about like entrepreneurship, you're doing it, right? So tell us what you're up to with your business right now.
Happy to. So after about 30 years, and that number always shocks me when I say 30 years, but after 30 years left the corporate world and bought a franchise. So the company's called Art of Drawers. It is a home remodeling business. We basically do two things. We design and install drawers in existing cabinets, pantries, kitchens, and then we do cabinet refacing. And so I have the Dayton, Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky market and looking to expand to Columbus. So I'm just trying to build this out here. Just started really last 30 days or so.
Really exciting time, right?
Yeah.
And obviously it sounds like this whole business model is around personalization for people.
It is, yes. It's about making the most lived areas in your home more enjoyable.
So as you think about this concept, entrepreneurship, right, and people hear about it, but you worked in the business world, as you said, 30 years of experience. What's it mean to you in terms of the doing that, people like Jeff then have to try to transfer to younger people?
Yeah, right now I'm an employee of one, so I went from a firm of 750,000 down to one, and so for me the challenge is hiring people and finding people with the right skills that I need. In the meantime, it's kind of being jack of all trades. I do feel like over my career I've kind of done everything from a consulting career to sales to technology and marketing, so I understand a lot of the pillars, and I have a supply chain background as well for operations. So I feel like I understand all the different moving parts, but every day is different right now because I'm doing all the jobs at once, and so just kind of putting them all together. I do hope at some point I can bring some interns on to learn, the role and what happens in entrepreneurship in a young company. So,
do you think like
Jeff.
Time management for you as the owner and leader of this, right, becomes a priority?
It's critical. I mean, my thought process every day is what's the most important thing I need to do right now to get to the next step. And sometimes things jump in priority and you have to adjust on the fly. But yeah, time management is the key. And then not just from a work standpoint, but because there's so much to do, it can carry over into personal life, and you need to find time to take a break and also kind of recharge your battery as well.
Such an important lesson. I think, Jeff, experientships, this internship program that you've been developing now for a few years at the high school, and obviously bringing on Lauren Richardson to help, and we're launching. I noticed you guys have been doing some orientation programs with the kids, and time management is becoming something that you're talking about, right? And anybody who wants to do these internships kind of has to go through a little bit of a screening process. What are the key lessons that you're trying to transfer to them that I think I'm hearing from Scott about time management?
Yeah, well, first, just listening to Scott, I just get so excited because you have a story where there's an individual successful in a particular market that has been kind of your bread and butter for so long, and then still through 30 years, he's, you know what, I'm going to take a risk and do something different, and then I'm going to take something that I'm somewhat familiar with, but I'm going to utilize all my skills and see if I can take this idea and launch it to a whole nother level. That's exactly what we're doing through entrepreneurship and through experientships. And so one of the key parts of all of this work is trying to teach and educate not just our kids, but our adults as well, that the world of work is not simply looking for content experts. They're looking for skill experts. And so even listening to Scott and talking about like prioritizing his day, what is the most important? How do I use different skill sets I learned in different areas of finance and business to launch my company, be a successful right now team of one? So when you think about time management, it is one of the most fundamental key executive skills that, let's be honest, all of us are learning every day to practice. How do I prioritize my day? How do I find the distractions in my life, identify those distractions, and then utilize certain resources or guides or ideas to be able to hone my time, maximize my time, pick and choose what matters most so that I can be more successful, whether it's experiences, a business, studying for school, whatever
and
that may be.
maybe with family, as you said, Scott, right? And I think there's this notion of people talk in the media about work-life balance, but there's really no such thing. It's more about, like you said, prioritize so that all these things you do give time to.
That's right.
How do you do that, father, dad of Indian Hill Braves? How do you do that, right, with family? And how do you teach that to the kids who are coming through these schools? I think there's a notion today that our students have everything scheduled and they're involved in so many activities. And again, your sons, we know what their schedules are kind of like, right? But how do you impart that with them as they're going through their school?
Yeah, my wife and I just talked about the importance of managing time, doing what needs to get done next, but also taking breaks. Because to your point, I mean, it's so competitive to get into colleges, and I think kids feel the pressure to load up on AP classes, take on all these different clubs and activities, and I think that's all very healthy, but you still have to carve time to be a kid, whether it's playing a video game or, searching through social media. You do need a little bit of a mental break. So we are always encouraging our kids to take that break and do something.
So let's harken back to the 87 to 91 era.
The golden age.
The golden age. How did you do that? Or now when you reflect back, how do you know you had that healthy balance as a Brave? And what were the things that really stood out to you as like the fun moments or the experiences that you kind of think about nostalgically? How do you know that you had that well-rounded experience, or did you?
I felt like I did. When we moved back to Cincinnati and I knew we were going to start a family, my goal was to get to Indian Hill schools. I had such a great experience here that I wanted my kids to be part of that as well. I don't remember being super stressed. I'm sure I was. I loved playing sports. I think I was a pretty decent student. And so it took a lot of time to do that, but I don't remember a lack of quality of life. I enjoyed my time here, and I felt like I had a balance. Whether I did or not, I don't know, but it seemed like it.
Are there traditions or activities that when you think back now, oh man, I got to do that at Indian Hill. That was so much fun with my friends or my classmates. Is there something that you would point to?
Yeah, we don't do it anymore, but for homecoming, we used to build floats.
Oh.
So, it was the chicken wire, and you'd stuff the crepe paper in, and every year there was a theme, and so that was an activity leading up to homecoming. Somebody with a barn or a large garage, we'd pull a trailer in and pull it together, and so we would spend nights after doing homework creating these floats, and then there was a competition, and that's gone by the wayside years ago.
And the parades here for homecoming are really a tradition that continue and a big deal, but that's something that's evolved probably more into the banners, I think it sounds like. Particular teachers or educators that stood out to you that when you think back now about all the things you've done in business, you're like, maybe I didn't know it then, but boy, they had an impression on me?
Yeah, there were several. Mrs. Loughran comes to mind. She taught social studies. Even going back to elementary school, I had a discovery teacher, Sandy Hart, who was fantastic. Cindy Crilly was my gym teacher and loved her. There were a number. Bob West was an English teacher, and he was fun. I mean, there were a lot of good teachers.
I love the fact that you could just rattle those off so quickly, thinking about that. And when you said about coming back to the area, making sure maybe your children could have the same kind of public school experience you had here, what was hard? What was hard in high school back then?
Let's see. That's a good question. I don't remember anything being challenging. I didn't like biology. That was when I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor. The dissecting of animals was not my forte, so.
That's kind of why I asked, because you still, even then, right, you learned a little bit of probably about what you didn't want to become or do. Jeff, when we talk about that, like, how does your program, the Entrepreneur Center, and then the foundation has been supporting you with the speaker series that's being developed, Business at Breakfast, alumni coming back in and doing things like this. How are we trying to help students learn what they don't want to do, or give them a challenge that maybe is hard that helps them define their path?
Yeah, I think you asked the right question, and as a science guy, it hurts my heart a little bit that he hated biology, because that's what I taught. Could have been different maybe if you were in my class, but the Experiences program, we talk about pursuing your passions, but at the same time, we want you to explore what you're curious about. a lot of times what we think or what we think we want to do or what we know about the future is usually related to a parent, a grandparent, a guardian, a friend's parent, of what they do for a living. But when do we really give them a few things? When do we give them the opportunity to expose themselves to those arenas? Do they really, like, as Scott said, do they really want to be a physician? And if so, why? Is it because I'm really good at biology class? Or is it because the part of being in a space with a team and operating, it's something that really gets me going? Or is it the reverse, that I really thought that was my dream? It's always something I thought I was interested, maybe because of a class that I enjoyed. But once I was in the space, it wasn't what I expected. And maybe I wasn't comfortable or even cut out for that. There's such power in exposing our kids to a vast network of opportunities, so that, yes, we want them to pursue their passion, but at the same time, if that passion becomes fully or further sparked, that's a win. If they find out, wow, that's not what I thought it was, and that changes their focus and course and conversations, there's great power in that too. So one of our jobs is
great power, definitely, in narrowing that that pathway or those opportunities, that field of opportunities. I mean, if somebody says to you, Scott, like, well, how do you become the CEO, right? Like, that's a really broad question.
That is.
But what about the skills necessary to become an owner or CEO? That's different, right? What would you say are some of the top skills that you've developed and that you have to have that success throughout this career, now going on 30 plus years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the most important are people skills. No matter what your role is, if you're going to be in business, you have to be able to interact with people. And so that's a softer skill, but something you have to build. I think the core fundamentals of understanding finance are important, just to understand how a business works. And after that, I think you have to lean on whatever you are best at and then rely on hiring others to augment you. I don't think you have to be a jack of all trades, but I think leadership, people skills, and finance are critical, and then the rest of those you can go and add on.
You said relying on others to augment you, and I think this is another area where Jeff and the program and our partnership with foundation members and alumni is really helpful to our students right now. People don't really know how to build a network, but they could be taught.
Yes.
So what's a piece of advice you would give to someone who's trying to be successful as a young adult and build a network that can help them?
Building a network, and I'm discovering this now, is absolutely critical, because once you start a new venture, it gives you people to reach out to for advice or referrals or any other, whatever it might be. And it requires, again, it goes back to really good personal skills. You can't build a network if you're not somebody who's enjoyable or valuable to be around. And it also requires follow through. You can't build a network if you just touch base with somebody 30 years ago and you never reach back. So there's a repetition to it. It also requires a give and take, that you are giving and receiving from your network. If it's just about you, then people will not value you in their network.
That's fascinating, right? The service piece of it becomes really important. There is an exchange and a partnership if you're going to have this network over time that is valuable to you.
That's right.
Jeff, how are we doing that with some of the programming? And maybe talk a little bit about the speaker series and Business at Breakfast, so that people in the audience would understand what are these things, because you're really trying to do what I think Scott is talking about.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, what a great spokesperson Scott is for all of really the why behind the work. And so you're right. There are a variety of different events that we're running to expose students to what's ahead of them, to allow them to have the opportunity to connect with individuals that maybe they know, adults that are in the field, and have some of those conversations about their story. So you mentioned things like Business at Breakfast. Business at Breakfast is an event we run 3 times a year, and we invite partners, community members, parents. We invite alumni back. That is an event. It's about a 90-minute event. It is open to all students. It happens in the cafeteria. We feed them. And really what that 90 minutes is, it's not a job fair. It is not a career fair. It really is a life fair. It is, students are asking questions for folks like Scott about their story, about lessons they learned, advice they would give, asking them about reminiscing as a high schooler. Who were you in high school? Did you ever think you wanted to be in finance? And those lessons and having the ability to have a conversation is cultivating those necessary skills. Maybe those conversations with folks like Scott end up to be a future job shadow at his new company or an internship. But the point of that morning is not that. The point is so students can increase their network, make a connection, exchange an email, exchange a LinkedIn profile, and say, hey, I really appreciate you speaking to me. And more importantly, as Scott mentioned, we do want our partners to see the level of, I'll call it quality, and how special our kids are here, because they too want to invite those students into their space. And as Scott said, it could become fringe benefit, a mutualistic partnership that benefits the student and benefits their business.
For a student, it could become an internship opportunity or a job opportunity or a reference in the future, maybe a mentor.
Absolutely.
And you and Meredith Ducey, our executive director of the IH Foundation, and members like Scott have been also working on trying to provide these network connections for speaker series. So what do we have to look forward to with the speaker series?
Yeah, I mean, the goal is as many as possible. Let's dream big. And so through the partnership with the foundation, really we want to combine our efforts. So in the past, any teacher who ever wanted someone of a particular field to come into their space, really from kindergarten to 8th grade, they often tapped into the foundation. And at the high school, they would tap into our program. And obviously we looked at both of those and said, well, that doesn't make any sense. It should be us collectively as Indian Hill, not one or the other. And so partnering with the foundation and then putting that form out, putting that invitation out to all, making sure we're sharing and we're learning. The foundation has an expanded network of folks that we have not quite tapped in yet, and we're building a network. So how powerful will that be as we continue to coalesce those groups? So
you mentioned before that there were kind of 4 really high demand pathways you're still working on tapping into for speakers. What are those areas that you're looking for still?
Yeah, so the big 4, and these are really geared by 2 forces. One, the world of work and what the world is asking us, and also students. So the big 4 right now are computer science, information technology, the healthcare industry, the business industry, and then really, I'll call it STEM because engineering falls within that STEM pathway. And we have a lot of our students that follow those 4. There's an interest in those 4 particular areas. Scott's children are a great example of that. So we know that as we expand that, we want those partners, I don't want to say first and foremost, but our students are hungry to be exposed and learn more from those professionals. And so with their help, we're building that network. And the Career Speaker Series the cadence is often, it could be a weekly person, a monthly person, but we're building out a calendar of events so that we can look at it every year, look back, see how we're successful, see how we add. But it really is as often as possible. If we could bring someone that is professional in any area into the space to speak to our students and staff, we're going to do that.
So Scott, obviously over time, right, you have a vast network, but you've been giving back to this community. I've known you now for 6 years. You've been on the foundation board as a member, but you've given back in your family, multiple generations now in the community giving back. When you think about Indian Hill and what makes the school district and this community unique, what are the things that you point to?
I think there is overall within the community a sense of giving back. I think that's something that got ingrained in me through my parents were great at doing that. And I don't think they ever told me to go do it, but I think it's just you learn by example and by watching.
Your mom's done this forever, from what I know.
She has, yeah. So. I think from PTO to village council and many other things that I probably can't even rattle off. She's constantly involved in the community, and my dad has been as well. But I mean, that's the one thing I noticed about Indian Hill. It's just there really is a true sense of community. I think the way it's run as a government, the idea is it's not broken, so let's not screw with it. It works. Let's keep it rolling. And so it's just an overall. It sounds cliche, but there's just a sense of community. I think people value living here, and they do their best to take care of where they are.
And I think that has been this through thread in this community for a long time, what you're talking about. People learn that certain things like service giving back, teamwork matter. It becomes cultural. Hopefully we maintain and sustain that and grow it and empower people to believe those things. And then they do good things for other people. And you've been doing that for a long time with your family. The kids have been involved here in school with lots of different activities. I want to go back to your high school days again before we wrap up today, because sometimes, right, people leave high school and they don't come back. But you know what the schools are like. You've been involved a long time. But when you think back to that era in school, whether it was a sport that you played or an activity you were involved with, like, was there an iconic moment that stood out? Like, was there a championship, or was there a powwow production, or was there something that you're like, boy, everybody should know that happened while I was at that high school, whether you were involved directly or not?
That is a really good question. Nothing.
I mean, you were there during the golden age.
I was. I don't know that we had any state titles in any sport in the time I was there. I know right before, I sort of came in the tail. Actually, I believe there was I take it back. I think Andrea Farley won 2 state tennis titles. I think the girls' tennis was a dominant force.
Tennis program was strong.
Was very strong. But I think other than that, I'm not sure. And the powwows were always fantastic.
Was Friday night like everybody's going to the basketball games, or what was it like?
It was. I actually think now there are less people that go to the basketball games. I remember everybody used to sit behind the benches, so that was the home for students and parents on that side, and the opposing side was away. Now they're sort of intermingled. But I remember the stands being filled from beginning to top. They would roll out the top bleachers. And so that was definitely, it seemed like a more popular event back then.
And I know you're a fan of a lot of sports, right? Yeah. And over time, there have been some really amazing student athletes that have come through this district. But when you were involved, right, who is it that you kind of look to and you think about and you're like, boy, man, they were one of the best teammates, or they were one of the best athletes, whether they were on your team or not?
Yeah, I remember Mike Eaton was an All-American soccer player here. I think he was a senior when I was a freshman, and he was fantastic to watch. One of my teammates in basketball, Mike Sievert, was the all-time leading scorer until Colin Shaw broke his record a couple of years ago. And Mike went on to play basketball Division III at Franklin and Marshall, and he was a treat to play with and to watch. Steve Innes, who's a good friend of mine, who's in the Hall of Fame, was a fantastic athlete and also fun to watch in soccer and basketball.
Love hearing about some of that and the memories. And then, we had our boys state championship soccer team here just recently, and some of these memories were coming back up, and people were talking about, well, back in the late 80s, the soccer team was pretty good, right? And there were some comparisons going on, which is always fascinating. So when you're not working, right, you and the doctor, you get out for a meal, you get out on the town, and you get to have that special meal that you want to have for fun. Where is it? What's your go-to? What are you eating?
It sounds easy, but we like to go to Embers and get sushi. I like the Precinct. We don't get down there enough, but I'd say Embers is just our quick, easy solution if we want a quick night out.
Love it. And Mr. Damadeo, I mean, I know you do a lot on Instagram now with this home cooking thing, which we could have a whole nother podcast about, Scott. But
great. When
you and your wife get out and you get away from the kids, maybe for a night on a date night, what's your go-to?
Like Scott, the Jeff Ruby Steakhouse Group is always a favorite. Boca, Soto are always really special treats if we can get out. But we also, there's such great restaurants in the city. We try as many as possible. In fact, we have one coming up. We're going to go check out a new place. I think it's called just Five and Vine. And we like to just explore. This is a great city with a lot of great choices. And so there are a couple go-tos, but we like to see, as things develop, go check them out.
Well, I think there are lots of things to check out with people like Scott Holzapfel, alumni. We're really proud of you and all that you've done with your career, that you give back and you spend time in the schools. Obviously that you are a family here in our district currently, and really appreciate the service that you give as a foundation board member for so many years, and all these other things your family are involved with. Scott, wish you the best with Art of Drawers.
Thank you.
And hopefully you're going to get to entertain lots of people here in Cincinnati as you build this empire.
I
And
hope so.
let us know how it's going, and spend some time with the students when you get a chance sharing your talents.
Yeah, I look forward to bringing in some kids at the right time to learn and help me as well.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Scott, for being here on the EduHERO Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.